Evening folks, this is BestInSlot, and tonight in celebration of June 12th, i.e. the 1 year anniversary of Jurassic World Evolution, we're going to take a look back at just how much the game has changed in the last 12 months. It's easy to forget sometimes how much has happened since the game has released, but through several pieces of DLC and some big, large, free updates, Evolution is a very different and much better game than it was at first. So, let's go on a dive through the history of the game, going all the way back to June 12th, 2018. When Evolution first released, it smashed Frontier's own sales records. Smashed them! And continues to be the best selling, if you scale for time, game they've ever released by a fairly sizable margin. The power of the Jurassic World franchise was very, very strong. However, despite some decent pre-release hype, very much a part of that, I will admit, the game did not release in a great state. I know I was very positive prior to release, but my own review of the game was, whilst not negative because I didn't love the game, it did have multiple fairly clear issues. These ranged from limited sandbox options to the very frustrating way the game handled environment mechanics for your dinosaurs, to the limited animation sets and limited behavioural sets. All of these problems would eventually be addressed, but it's safe to say Evolution was a little bit more bare bones than most of us expected when it first went public 12 months ago. Now, this wasn't really a problem that was going to be fixed by the introduction of new dinosaurs, but that's what the very first content drop for the game entailed. Releasing 10 days later than release on the 22nd of June to coincide with the release of Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, the Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom Dinosaur Update Pack added 6 new dinosaurs, bringing the roster, if you include the deluxe edition, which I think most of us picked up, from 42 up to 48. Spinosaurus, Allosaurus, Indoraptor, Carnotaurus, Baryonyx and Stygimoloch is a group that contains some of the game's best loved dinosaurs. Cough, Sinoceratops, cough. But beyond that and some bug fixes, including one that stopped your helicopters randomly falling out of the sky, which is pretty cool, not much really fundamentally changed with the game itself. That first big fundamental change we needed would have to wait almost 2 months for the 13th of September, the first major free update the game got in the form of patch 1.4. It's easy to forget now, but the game's challenge mode was not actually a release feature and was introduced in patch 1.4 alongside some brand new skins. This challenge mode allowed players to tackle Isla Nublar in the game on various difficulties without worrying about silly meaningless things like story or plot. Instead focused on building the best park possible in the shortest amount of time. The mode was interesting at first, and some replayability outside of the campaign and sandbox mode was greatly appreciated as well, even if the lack of RNG has eventually led it to being more of a calculated slog than anything else, particularly on the higher difficulties. The update contained another big change, however, in the form of dinosaur resizing. Initially said to be impossible, the 1.4 update changed the size of T-Rex, Spinosaurus, Giganotosaurus and Ceratosaurus, scaling down the Rex and the Ceratosaurus and scaling up the Giga and the Spino. At release, the Rex was dominant in size against all other large carnivores other than the Indominus Rex, and the Giga was bizarrely tiny. It looked utterly weird. It barely outscaled the Ceratosaurus, they were essentially the same size. Along with those changes, the sandbox mode got some much needed options, including unlimited feeders and unlimited electricity, some new achievements and some new contracts were added, and there was a huge host of bug fixes and small quality of life changes. 1 week later, on the 20th of September, there was a bug fix passed in the form of 1.43 and 1.44 and 1.45 coming soon after, and these just addressed some crashing issues, but it was a similar 2-month gap until the next major change for Evolution in the form of patch 1.5 and the very first paid DLC for the game, The Secrets of Dr. Wu. These two released together on the 20th of November. The focus of the free patch 1.5 was mainly on the dinosaur AI and behaviours. It introduced a lot of stuff we take for granted now, including alphas, social behaviours, sleeping and leadership battles, not sleeping battles, sleeping and leadership battles, as well as the introduction of a day-night cycle, new contracts and new high-capacity feeders. It probably wasn't as large a patch as 1.4 in terms of free content, though the new behaviours certainly made our dinosaurs more interesting than they had been before. Side note, the alpha behaviours do have this unfortunate side effect of causing your dinosaurs to spend more time than usual inside each other, which is fun for the dinosaurs but a little weird for us. Anyways, it was a worthy change overall. The Dr. Wu DLC was a major paid update for the game, the first of its kind, and changed the game in quite a few fundamental ways. We got a brand new storyline taking us to new areas on our existing islands, Isla Muerta East and Isla Tucano Research Facility. Neither are particularly large, but the former became a bit of a cult hit simply due to being a nice looking area to build in. It also introduced 5 brand new dinosaurs such as Troodon and Olorotitan, as well as the first and last, so far, expansion to the hybrid roster with Spinoraptor, Stegoceratops and Ankylodocus. And as everyone knows, Ankylodocus is my all-time favourite. The biggest change in Doctor Wu and the main reason for people to pick up the DLC outside of the dinosaurs was the new genetics system, one that allowed you to edit the social, stress and environmental needs of your dinosaurs. At the time, this was a fundamental change to the game. Now, thanks to updates in Sandbox mode, that has changed a little bit, but at the time it was very, very exciting, allowing us to put several large carnivores together in one exhibit for the first time, or cram multiple dinosaurs into tiny spaces, or stop the sauropods' incessant need for 10 bajillion trees. Along with those genes, we got a new camouflage gene for the Indominus Rex, and it was cool, so that's pretty cool. It was 1 month later, and after one round of bug fixes via 1.5.3, that we got our next biggish update, 1.6. The free aspect of this update focused on making the 1.4 challenge mode better. The new mode was expanded to encompass the other 7 areas of the game, including the new Doctor Wu map, and came with 2 new skins per challenge mode for a total of 14 brand new dinosaur skins. Some of these skins were pretty cool. The Ceratosaurus skin, the T-Rex skin. Some of them, including the new Raptor skin, were unfortunately not. It's not like me to mention the Velociraptor skins, is it? Anyways, there were further improvements to Sandbox, including no longer needing to worry about incubations failing or population, social and habitat needs. This was a substantial change to how Sandbox mode was played, and it is worth really noting the huge difference between Sandbox at release, which was very limited, and the much more expansive mode we had by the end of December of 2018. Along with 1.6 came the Cretaceous Dinosaur Pack, our very first paid Dinosaur Pack DLC, and at a lower price point than the more inclusive Doctor Wu DLC. This pack contained the Dreadnoughtus and the Carcharodontosaurus, both of which turned out, in my opinion, to be fairly disappointing inclusions, with the latter being one of my personal all-time least favourite dinosaurs. Whoops, but also the Iguanodon, and the Iguanodon was a sign of better things to come. Not only did it have a great chunky chubby model, but it played entirely different than the other similar herbivores in the game. Along with brilliant custom eating animations, it could fight back against small carnivores, and did so with a falcon kick to the head. Still one of the best animations in the game, to this day, if not the best. The Iguanodon was a new high point for post-release dinosaurs. 2019 unfortunately has so far been a bit of a slower year for Jurassic World Evolution, and it was a fairly huge 4 months between patch 1.6 that we just talked about and patch 1.7, with only bug fixes and a new Stegosaurus skin coming in the meantime. This was probably the low point for the game. Whilst it was still much better than it was at release, the lack of updates or information on updates was becoming a little bit frustrating, understandably, to the player base. The 2-month update cycle had almost doubled. When we did get an update, patch 1.7, it wasn't a particularly large one either, simply adding a new camera mode to the game. This has turned out to be a great addition, particularly for console users or those gaming on AMD PCs, but it also felt a little like being shortchanged after such a huge wait. As it turns out, there's a pretty good reason for this, but at the time it was definitely disappointing. The paid DLC Carnivore Dinosaur Pack, however, released at the same time on the 17th of April and added 3 of the best new dinosaurs to the game. Building on the increased animation quality of the Iguanodon, the Proceratosaurus, Acrocanthosaurus and Herrerasaurus all come with brand new, and in some cases, such as the Acro's human kill and the Herrera's feeder animation, very cool animations. The Acro is also insanely chubby, and that annoys a lot of people, but I'm pretty sure he's the best dinosaur ever made. He is the goodest boy. And that, folks, was the last major change for Jurassic World Evolution, until 6 days time, at least. Patch 1.8 is out soon on the 18th of June, once again reversing to our beloved 2-month update cycle, and is likely the biggest free update the game has ever had, and is probably partially responsible for the dearth of content we've had for the last 6 months. Dearth is such a good word. Patch 1.8 will bring new terrain tools to the game along with unique placeable trees and rocks. It'll bring new AI changes to the sauropods and pachycephalosaurids. It'll bring gyrosphere gates, it'll bring new randomization options to challenge mode, and it'll bring wetland mechanics along with fish feeders for the Spinosaurids in the game, along with a host of quality of life changes. The most exciting feature here is obviously the rocks. You can disagree, but that's wrong. It's just rocks, folks. Rocks. On the 18th of June, the new paid story DLC for Evolution will also arrive, Claire's Sanctuary. Similar to Secrets of Doctor Wu, as will complete various story missions across 2 new playable areas, this time Nublar North and Sanctuary Island from Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. It'll also introduce more limited 3 dinosaurs this time, Albertosaurus, Euoplocephalus and Tyrannosaurus. Along with those, we're getting a new paleobotany system with a new greenhouse building, a new Jurassic truck tour like that of the first film, and a new herbivore feeder. In some ways, I'd say the Claire DLC is a little bit smaller than the Doctor Wu DLC, but the free update is definitely more sizable, so it balances it out a little bit. And that's it, folks. That's where we are. From 6 playable areas to 10, from 42 dinosaurs to 62 dinosaurs, from a limited sandbox to one with a load of options, from a day-night cycle to herbivores and carnivores that won't fight, from no terrain tools to, well, glorious, glorious rocks. Evolution has come a long way in a year, and I really do think that's worth remembering. Frontier got a lot of flack, some of it rightly so, even if in my opinion the vitriol got a little bit excessive, for the state of Evolution at release, regardless of why that was the case. But big free updates, and other than the first 4 months of this year, fairly continuous updates, has left the game in a much better position than it started. The game does still have problems, and whilst this is overall meant to be a very positive, happy video, they're worth mentioning what I think are still the major problems with the game today. So, the terrain management and building placement is still a disaster. I suspect that isn't going to be fixed without some serious reworking of the engine. The basal gameplay is unfortunately a little bit simple and repetitive, and the lack of good dinosaur skins for some species I'm not going to name continues to be immensely confusing and bizarre to me. The combat is daft, always has been, always will be, with particular note to the way the dinosaurs for some reason decide halfway through battle to back away from each other until they're both back to 50% health and then they'll return to battle again. I have no idea why this mechanic was ever introduced, but it's been very weird from the start, and it makes fights a lot less interesting when you know at some point they're just gonna stop. Finally, whilst the dinosaurs themselves have much better behaviours than they did at the start, they are still a little bit limited. The social circles they stand in are a little bit odd, there's a lack of pack hunting or really any dynamism to the hunting at all, and because of the lack of enrichment items and interspecies dynamics, the dinos can still get a little bit boring to look at. I feel some of these problems are probably fundamental to Evolution, the combat in particular, along with the way the guests work and the somewhat simple management systems, but I cannot stress enough how far the game has come in the last 12 months, and that if we got another 12 months with a similar stream of updates and content, well, it genuinely has the chance of being the best dinosaur game ever made. I don't think it's that far away at the moment, I really don't. I do think it's easy to forget how much has changed. It's like you've got a friend who's trying to lose weight, but you kind of see them all the time so you barely notice, and then they get upset about it so they steal your Pokemon cards. It's a frog in a pot of soon to be boiling water. I think it's clear though a lot has been added to the game, and as much as it deserved criticism upon release, and still does in some places as I've just said, it deserves praise now as well, and so do Frontier for the way it's been developed since. Anyway, there we go. If you enjoyed this trip down memory lane, then help me out by throwing me a like, a subscribe if you're new, and a comment down below about which of these updates do you think has been the biggest change to the game so far. Early next week we're going to have an obsessive amount of content on Claire's Sanctuary and the new 1.8 patch, and we'll be back in a year as well, I guess, to see what has happened in year 2 of Evolution and maybe compare it there with its initial state again. And I'll see you lovely folks in the next episode. Cheers, much love as always, bye bye. Hey folks, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video and you want to help support me a little bit more, you can do so at patreon.com/bestinslot. There's a link in the description down below. Every little really does help in times like these, but it's not at all expected, and by just watching the video you've already helped me out massively, and it makes you a pretty cool person, so well done you. Thanks for joining me either way, I'll see you next time.